me the hope my voice holds out, so I just ask everyone to gather around as close as possible. I can talk loud, but I don't know how long it'll last, so bear with me. Folks, what I was going to say is if anyone would like a copy, what we have done is we've... can everybody hear me in the back? No? Hear me good? Good? Okay. What I have done here is we went to... I didn't know... Most people did not know that we had these sandburn maps. And you can get these maps, for the most part, free of charge from the U.S. Library of Congress and the University of Alabama Archives. Okay, so if you go to either one of those websites, they will have this information. And it's a great resource because as I have been doing these tours now for 5 years, I've come to find one thing. Most people know where things were in Cullman, but they don't know the exact spot. Sometimes they're a block off or maybe even on the other side of the block. So these sandburn maps were developed for one purpose. They were for insurance companies. And what insurance companies would do is they would see a design of the house. And on these sandburn maps, you will see where fire hydrants are. You also see where fire stations are. And it has a very detailed list of what types of fire departments were in that area at that time. And it's very interesting if anybody is interested in fire departments and police departments, it has that detailed information on it. And what those insurance companies would do is they would base their insurance prices from how far a building was from either a fire department or a fire hydrant. And the same thing with the police department. Later years they would base, theft and, insurance policies for your businesses from how far you were from a police station. So again, my name is in the phone book, Michael Sullins. The only thing I ask is that you do not call me until October 9th. Because I'll be honest, I will not get back to you. But please feel free to call me and I'll be glad to meet you somewhere and I won't charge anything. I'm glad to hand this information out.
And if any Cullman High School students haven't had their things signed, their papers signed for their credit, just holler at any of us, me or Michael, either one can sign it. All right. Or somebody at the end of the tour.
And I did bring a pen, so I did remember that. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to do something a little different. We normally start down there, but this year we're starting at the Fest office. But if everybody's familiar with Depot Park, or you can go down there later, let me just give you, just a very brief history. At Depot Park, of course we now have the 51 flags and the park itself. That was a undeveloped area up until the 1920s. Now, for people that are not, anybody here not from Cullman, let me give you a real quick history. Again, I know I'm a little running behind, but Cullman was founded by John G. Cullman and 5 families in 1873. And from those 5 families came what you see today, Cullman. I am very proud that my great-great-grandfather, Nick Reel, also came here in 1873 with my great-grandfather, John Reel, who was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. So my family history goes all the way back to the founding of Cullman. One other thing that is often brought up with Colonel Cullman, he came here, he was a revolutionary in Germany, he was escaping the movement that was going on in Germany at the time. He wanted to find a colony in the Americas for German immigrants, and it has been, some people have said that he has brought up to 10,000 people to this area, to America, German immigrants. One of the things that he did when he was in Germany is he was an engineer. And one of the tremendous features of the city of Cullman is its wide streets. When he designed the streets, he specifically wanted where 4 wagons with a team of horses could stand side by side by side by side and be able to drive down the road. And that's why the streets today look like they do, because they were designed so 4 horses and wagons could pass. So I think that's a very interesting feature. So and I'm going to tell some other things of Colonel Cullman's history. If I direct your attention to Depot Park, that was an undeveloped area until the 1920s, and it served as a company called Cullman Warehouse Company. Now, the reason that Cullman Warehouse Company is important is because of 2 things. That was one of the first companies and buildings in the city of Cullman to have a feature called skylights. Oh. And one of the things that they had in their warehouse was, of course, the cash crop for this area at the time which was strawberries, but they also housed cotton. And in that, and where they had the bales of cotton was not only in that warehouse, but if you see where Desperation Church is across the street, that also served as a place where they had bales of cotton. And on the map, on the thing that I hand out, you can see a photo of that block in the 1920s with Cullman Warehouse, and on the street across from it, you can see the bales of bales of cotton, and it looks like it snowed. So it's a very interesting photo if anybody's not seen it. The only other important thing that was on that block behind Cullman Warehouse, almost where the city police department is now, was the earliest laundromat in Cullman called the Standard Laundry. Of course, it's long gone now, but if you wanted to go get your clothes cleaned, that's where you went. Now, where you see this building, which is now the Cullman City Hall, that was built in 1964. And those motorcycles were probably built before that time too. But now, in all seriousness, I love Harleys. But one thing that I wanted to say is there were some very interesting things across the street here. This lot originally had numerous residential dwellings. So, you know, back around 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, this is where people actually lived in the city of Cullman. Then it turned into, in the 1920s, businesses started popping up on this side. And when the first business that actually popped up on this side was a livery stable. Now, I know that some of the city fathers here today do not like what I'm about to say, but I want this to be taken in the humorous manner that I'm trying to explain this is. This livery stable also had two side businesses. It was a blacksmith shop, and it sold manure. And so that was actually the first business that was there. So, you know, some people like politicians and some people say, hey, well, but anyway, my stepfather is one, so he doesn't like that joke much either. On the back side of the city hall was another very important company here in the city of Cullman. It was on the back side, and it was called Holmes and Lyle's Cotton Gin. Now, let me explain why this one was important. This was composed of two buildings. The northernmost building on this side housed a seed house, and the building on the southern corner contained an electrical power system, which was the first in Cullman. It was called a Luminous System Cotton Gin, and it was electrical powered. Again, this was built in the 1920s, and the Luminous Corporation, where they got this cotton gin from, was a company in Columbus, Georgia. So they shipped it on the train from Columbus, Georgia to here, took it across the street, and that was the first business in the city of Cullman to have electric power. So there you go. Very important block. Now, we're going to move up to this next block, right over here by the library, and move over here and talk a little bit about this block. Since we have such a large group, I'll be glad to entertain questions at the end, if I still have a voice. I would like to point out one thing while we walk, and I hope everybody can hear me. I'll let everybody move forward a little bit as we walk. This street that you're seeing the folks over here partying is called Clark Street. Now, believe it or not, when this street was originally named, it was called Arnold Street. And you're saying, well, Michael, Arnold Street's over there. Well, yes, it is today. But one thing that a lot of people do not know is that the Arnold family was a very important family in this area. And when the railroad came through and Colonel Cullman had the foresight to drop the tracks and put viaducts across, the viaducts served an important purpose. And it goes back to those sandburn maps. They had a fire station on one side of the city. When there was a fire on the other side and there was a train unloading, the fire truck would have to go all the way around the train. And you would lose a lot of good time to get to that fire. So Colonel Cullman said, let's lower the railroad tracks and build bridges so the fire trucks can get to the other side of town. Well, when they were deciding this, they decided that this street would be one of the streets that would lose its access to the other side. So at one time, this street reached from down there all the way down to the west side uninterrupted. Well, the Arnold family did not like the fact that their street was going to be split. Because of the split, they was going to have to change the other side of the street name. So they wanted a street that was all the way across, so they ended up taking the next street over so their family could have the entire street across that astride the city of Cullman. So let's move this way. I think we're having more fun. Is there anybody still not be able to hear me? Raise your hand, don't be shy. Okay.
That's a valid point.
Raise your hand if you're not here. I'll go to the back and check it.
We may have to do this tomorrow night, so.
I may.
Get a speaker system.
Uh-oh. If anybody wants to help her out and relight her fire, that'd be great. If anybody else is out, I didn't bring my lighter, so maybe we got enough. All right. Can y'all in the back hear me?
Oh, dear.
Okay. The trains are not helping out, so I apologize. Across the street, you will see the Cullman County Library. Now, this is something I thought a little interesting. As I said, the City Hall was built in 1967. Well, so was the Cullman County Library, so there's a lot of activity here in 67. Now, like the other block, this block was originally dwellings of houses for the longest period of time. Then, let me help you out here. Okay. Then in the 1960s, as with a lot of the other parts of this town, this area started growing, and one of the first businesses here, where you now see the Cullman Power Board, was Hugh Brindley's grocery store. Now, the grocery store was established in 1962. Now, we're going to go in a few minutes and see the original spot of Hugh Brindley's grocery store. Now, the property was okay, then the Hugh Brindley grocery store turned into Piggly Wiggly, which is also on 157. And the Piggly Wiggly was eventually sold in 1990 to the city and renovated to see the Cullman Power Board. The only other thing of significance on this block, on the back side, was one of the earliest veterinarian practices. It was Dr. Carter, and on that block, it was his house and his veterinarian clinic. Now, on the block that we're standing on here, basically this block was dominated up until the 1960s by nothing but housing. And according to the Sanborn maps, up until 1960, this block that we're standing on actually had 10 individual houses on this block. So they're all kind of a little tight, but they're all wooden dwellings. And most of them were two-story houses. And we do have photos of that, too. So, again, if you're interested, please contact me after Oktoberfest, and I will be glad to get you that information. So now we're going to move over here to Sacred Heart. Does everybody still be able to hear me? Good.
S-A-N-D-B.
O-U-R-N.
Okay.
And then if you type in the city of Cullman, it'll come up with all the maps.
Okay.
Now,
And I'm
some of them,
assuming they would have maps available for a lot of places. The whole
well,
state.
believe it or not, most cities were not progressive enough to do the Sanborn maps because it cost them money. Cullman
The
was
city
one,
had to foot the bill for that.
yes, the Cullman was actually one of the first cities in the state of Alabama to do that.
Wow.
It wasn't the first, it was one of the first.
That's so cool.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They sure did.
Yeah.
Good. They suck. Step.
I did. It was very good.
I know.
entertain. Yeah. Stacy was saying she could stay all night and sing those gospels. I told her we'll have to go there. We'll have to go see the Revelation. We're not such a big herd.
But they are very good. Very good. We understand that one of them had such
Yes, they did.
That's right.
What we'll do is we'll stand here in front of the bulletin board so nobody will have to stay in the ground.
But I think she's going to be looking at her son. I need for her a pink dress.
Oh, yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm going to do a little tease here because I want people interested in history. This is a very historic block, in my opinion, because what you're seeing here is living history. And let me tell you why. This is one of 3 blocks left in the city of Cullman that still has the current residing original owner. Now, if you look at the Sanborn maps, you will find out who the other 2 are. So that'll give you an opportunity to, if you want to find some really good, interesting history, it's a little tease. There are 3 still in the city of Cullman, and Sacred Heart is one of them. Sacred Heart purchased this lot from Colonel Cullman in 1877. Now, what is interesting to me is when this block was originally purchased, the church, the Sacred Heart Church, and again, I have a photo of it on the handout, was originally on this corner. It was a one-steeple wooden church. Behind the wooden church was the nuns' convent, Sacred Heart Convent, which of course is now on the Convent Road. Where you see the church now standing was originally a 2-story wooden schoolhouse. So if you look into the 1880s and 1890s, if you flip it, you will see history. And we do have photos of it, and if you have not seen them, they're absolutely gorgeous. One thing that I found very interesting, and I've not been able to have anyone tell me exactly what this was, but the maps, of course, next year, in 2 years from now, this building will celebrate its centennial because the cornerstone was laid in 1913. The year that the cornerstone was laid was also a year that the Sanborn maps were made for Cullman. It's very interesting because where the right behind where the schoolhouse is now, they actually had a stone shrine on that spot, which is no longer there. And I haven't been able to find anyone that's been able to tell me what was at that stone shrine. So if you know anyone, I've asked a lot of people. I've even asked Father Patrick, who currently is the priest here, and no one knows. So that might be lost to history, but maybe somebody here will know and they can come tell me. Where you are standing now is the original site where the bulletin board is. During the 1890s, this was also mostly residential. Up until the 1900s, when it was made into a lumber yard. There was also which ironically is kind of funny, right here where well, I think this is a hospice, but it used to be a doctor's office, and that used to also be a medical facility at the turn of the century. The only other significant business owner on this lot was where the bulletin board used to be a jewelry store. Now, the name's been lost to history, but again, that's one of those things where we're continue searching, and one we hopefully will find out, because as far as we know, it's the earliest jewelry store in Cullman. after the lumber yard when it was already leveled because it was nothing but lumber yard, Wholesale Buggies and Wagons Company was one of the earliest businesses on this corner as well. And it was built in 1917. It also had a stove and a hardware store, and then it was sold and was made into Compass Bank, and then it was sold, and you have a medical office there now. All right, onward. I was, but we're kind of. I was going to say that. Yeah, yeah, that'd be great.
He's not that well behaved.
Yeah, she's surprised she's good. She doesn't get out.
This church was actually built, steeples, they were actually supposed to be taller, but there was a bank embezzlement at the German bank where they were keeping the church had all of their money. So they ended up only having enough money at the
I need to let y'all go. We're doing the walking tour. Hell, I walk.
supposed to be a story or two taller than that, actually.
I didn't know we had an escort. That's nice. Well, if y'all gather around me in kind of a U shape, that'd be helpful. Everybody loves the Burgermeister, so. Again, I am doing this pretty quickly. There's a lot more history that I'm not showing, and I know Greg was kind enough to share a little bit more. But again, I encourage y'all to call me or either come by in June and pick up some free copies, and I think you'll find it very interesting. The highlights on this particular block that we're standing on is across the street where you see the insurance agency. That used to be Frank Byers' Cotton Gin and General Store. He built it in 1900 and it was replaced. It was originally a wooden frame, and then he ended up making it into he tore it down and he ended up making a concrete floor, and then ended up building another wooden structure, which I thought was kind of interesting. The building had a cotton platform that took up most of the block, all the way up to where the post office now stands. Now, where the post office is, prior to 1913, when it was built, ironically the same year as the church was built, this lot was a lumber yard. Now, for many years when I was doing this tour, people were saying that was the first post office in Cullman. Well, the Sandburn maps tell us differently. It's actually the third post office in Cullman. And tonight when we go on the tour, I will show you where the original two were. And one of the buildings that is still standing actually housed one of the first post offices. Behind us, as you can see, is if you look over here to the left where this bronze awning is Champ Crocker's law office. Now, if you will allow me one moment of personal reflection here, this used to be called Schmidt's Saloon. Now, as you know, many people may not be aware, but Cullman was just recently made wet once again. And there's a really rich history about how Colonel Cullman actually went down to Montgomery when the Constitution, before the one we have today in 1901, like it was in 1887, I think, he actually went down to Montgomery when they were redrafting the Constitution and made Cullman one of 2 counties that could only sell draft beer. So this was a very popular spot, and when we get on the west side, I will tell you more about how popular the spot was. Well, T.D. Schmidt's Saloon was a place that my grandmother, Frances Reel, actually visited, and she lived on the east side of Cullman. And my grandmother recently passed away just a few years ago, God rest her soul, but she did tell me, I think, a very interesting story. Her and her best friend, her name was Julie, they would walk about 2.5 miles and come to Schmidt's Saloon. Now, this is a girl that's about, 16, 15, and she was 100% German, but she hated beer. The reason that she went to Schmidt's Saloon is because it was one of the few places for her to enjoy her favorite drink, a knee-high. So they served knee-high drinks in the Schmidt's Saloon. So I thought that was a little interesting. A few other things that were here that of interest, a major company where the bank is, or the bank and loan is, which used to be Parker Bank. Before it was Parker Bank, it was the Adam Drescher and Company Furniture Factory. Now, he was a very prominent man in Cullman, one of the most prominent men in the early 1900s in Cullman. Unfortunately, he built it in 1877, and it burned in 1892. So he rebuilt it again. And here's something else that was neat. It burnt down again in 1910, and he rebuilt it again. So I thought that guy had a lot of fortitude. So after 3 times it burnt down, they decided next to it in 1917, right on the other side of Champ Crocker's office, to build the Cullman City Fire Department number 1.
Kept them in business.
So there you go. Again, as I mentioned earlier, and as we walk down to the edge of the corner, the building that is now the Bank and Loan building used to be the Parker building. And I'm not going to walk this block over here, but one of the things I want to point out is where Tanya Melton's photography building is now. That is the original Parker Bank, for anybody that may or may not know. And actually one of the oldest buildings that are still in existence in Cullman. The other thing that I would like to mention before we move on, for those of you that may not be aware, one of the buildings that was lost to the devastating tornado in April was it used to be the Wisen electrical. I think he also fixed air conditioning. Well, that was originally the Esther Opera House, and it was actually one of the nicest opera houses you will find in the Southeast. And unfortunately, it was lost to the tornado. But the interesting thing about the opera house over there is they actually had 2 businesses. During the summer, they would, of course, have their shows, and they had a variety of shows: vaudeville, drama, comedy, a little bit of everything. But during the off-season, which was wintertime, they had to find a way to supplement their income. So they decided that since the ice factory, which we will see shortly, was right behind them, they utilized those resources to make it an ice skating rink in the wintertime. So it served as an ice skating rink around the turn of the century. So folks, we're going to move on down the next block and take a right. Those folks that we need to block off the highway. I'll do that. We'll cross through.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Greg, actually tell them we're going to cross on First Avenue. No, it'd be best here. I forgot. I remember that last time. That was a big mistake because they're coming off the thing over here. I'm going to stand on the other side of it and stop them. Now, folks, we did this last year and nobody got hurt. I promise. All right.
Excellent. He's got the right idea.
Thank y'all. All right, down this way. Miss Stacy.
Where's your helper? You need help? Let me hold your night light.
I don't know where she went up. I know I do.
Yeah. There we go. Short person. Watch. Yeah, short person. That's what I told him. Oh, I am. He found it a very important job.
No, we won't. I promise. No, nobody will get mugged. Is everybody holding up okay? We got one more. We're going to take a right at the next block, so we're going to start heading back after this block. Now, we're going to cover 3 blocks in this particular area. Now, I'm going to hit the other side where the Stiefelbauer building is, but where you see Lieben and Boyke was originally a wooden frame building that was called the Burr Home. It was actually a residential dwelling. It also, ironically enough, he had a small business that he actually sold strawberries out of. The building had a small wooden platform facing the road. Later, that corner became home to the Palace Saloon, the 2-story building, and it's a photo that I also have in this lecture series. Now, the Palace Saloon was demolished, and in that location, it was the Hugh Brindley grocery store, the original Hugh Brindley grocery store. And he later moved over there to the power board because he said, there's just not enough parking because I'm so busy. That's what he said. Or at least that's what the history records say. Then, of course, the corner was occupied by Skipper and Edson. Anybody remember those folks? Okay. Now, over here behind Lieben and Boyke, I'm going to ask the folks, does anybody know what used to be located there? The Lyric Theater, which was one of the best spots to go for a movie. One of my grandmother's 2 favorites. She also loved the Ritz. That was her favorite. Now, I got to tell a little story. Who here has not heard of the Duchess Bakery? Okay, that's okay. That's why I wanted to tell you this, because this is very important. This is very important. Well, Duchess Bakery is a Cullman tradition. If you ever come back, you need to go right over there. It's the 3rd building going that way. You'll see a sign that says the Duchess Bakery. I recommend the Bismarck. Everybody here, I will have a personal favorite. There you go. Donuts are also great, but you know what? They're homemade. And anything you get there is great. And I'm sure you ask anyone here and they'll tell you their favorite. But if anybody goes, but that company actually had a very auspicious beginning that many people may not know about. Originally, the City Bakery, the Dutch's Bakery was called the City Bakery. Now, the City Bakery was owned by a gentleman, and you may have heard this name before, Adolf Weigel. Have we got any Weigels here tonight? Well, this is a true story, so I've already said it in front of their family, and they agreed to it. So, Mr. Weigel started the City Bakery, but unfortunately, Prohibition came around, and so he decided that he was going to start another business, and it was called a bootlegging business where he sold Wildcat whiskey. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. Now, according to some folks, there's a little story that Mr. Weigel actually had the constable of Cullman, the police chief, in a little under-the-table stuff. Anytime someone bought some bootleg whiskey out the back, he would take some flour in his hands and pat him on the back. So when they were walking down the street, the police officer would know not to arrest that person. So it was a thriving business, to say the least. But I think that's interesting, and it's also kind of funny that one of the favorite spots started out as a bootlegging business. But it still has great donuts. Don't let me sell it short. Across the street here is also another very important historical landmark. As everybody might remember, we were started in front of the museum. That is a replica of Colonel Coleman's home. Well, the original Colonel Coleman's home was standing where Just for Looks and Berkeley Bob's was. Now, he wanted a place where the reason that he built it here was a very particular reason, because the original train depot was where we are standing today on this block, the first train depot. Now, you will also see a photo of that in this thing, in the handout if you would like one. Now, the train depot had three parts. The first part, which was right where we're standing, was the passenger side. It was a little section of the first section of the train depot. The middle section was the freight. That's where all the freight. It was actually a building that handled freight. And then the other half was a platform, and that's where they unloaded. They would unload the supplies onto the platform and move it into the warehouse. And then, of course, the folks, the people, would get on and off on this side where we're standing right now. So imagine if you could, coming off the train in 1890, let's just say, because I think that's about the right year for what I'm about to tell you. And yes, it is. So you'd come off the train and you would have two choices. You could either come over to Colonel Cullman and, meet him, maybe buy some land, try to get settled in. Or if you're feeling a little tired, you could go across the other side of the street where there were 3 saloons you could go to. And, from what I've been told on some people, I think y'all can probably guess where most people went to. And I'll tell you more about that other side of the street when we get over there. Now, one other thing that I want to point out, according to the Sanborn maps, in 1888, Colonel Coleman's home was here pretty much by itself. Where this building is now, which is the St. John's building, which houses Cullman Cleaners, that was a vacant lot. And he actually had a greenhouse with a glass roof. And that's where he planted all kinds of plants. And from what we can understand, it was the first glass roof building in the city of Cullman. His home burned down in 1912, and it was replaced by the Motion Picture Theater. Anybody remember that? The other thing I want to say about this block, I know where it's at if I can just find it. I told you about the train depot. Now, if you look at the building, past Berkeley Bob's, you see Cutie Patooties, and then the real estate. You'll see a 2-story building with 3 windows in the front. Does everybody see that? Mm-hmm. Well, folks, that's a very interesting building because in 1894, that very brick building housed the 2nd United States Post Office of Cullman. A lot of people do not know that, and I got the same reaction when I told it to the other folks. There are a lot of interesting businesses, and I'm just going to go over a few of them. The Cullman Tribune's original location was right here on this block. The Mayo Beauty Shop and Barber Shop was here. I'm just going to name a few, and again, you can look at this stuff on your own. Ward's Jewelry Store. The section over there that's burned out, I'll give folks a chance to tell me what that is. The Princess Art Shop. Now, I also want to say that on this corner, where the Smith & Smith law firm is way down there on the edge, that was originally called the Springer Hotel, which we can tell was the second oldest hotel in Cullman. I'm going to show you where the first one was. It later, in 1894, was changed to be called the Commercial Hotel. A lot of people may remember that one more. One other story I want to tell where the Smith & Smith law firm is, that used to be Hartung, that is true, and the hospital was upstairs, but in the 1920s it was also home to the People's Drugstore. Now, one quick little anecdote on that. Most people today are familiar with the Tea Party. It's a third-party movement that's getting started. Well, around the turn of the century, there was another political movement, another conservative political movement that started in two places, Kansas and Alabama, and it was called the People's Party. The People's Party was so popular that people started naming businesses after the party. And that, my friends, is one of the drugstores that was actually named for a political party, the People's Party. And that drugstore was owned by Philip Hartung, that's right, and his mother, Julia Cullman Hartung, which happened to be the niece of Colonel Cullman. The doctor's offices that we were speaking about, Dr. R.A. Culpepper, Dr. Ed McAdory, and the gentleman that delivered me, Dr. James Richards, which of course he wasn't over there at the time, so refused. And we're going to walk on down this way.
My aunt was married to Dr. McAdory's son.
Oh, really? And yes, Coons was here too. Again, more history than we can cover in one walking tour. I'm going to try to put this online after I'm finished with my duties. So that's something else I'll try to do.
All the saloons was over there. Was that the wrong side of the track?
That was the wrong side of the track. We got some interesting stories I got to tell you when we get over there. Again, there is so much history on this block alone. Now, we're going to take a right here. Just a few things I want to point out. Where you see the Mary Carter paint store used to be the German bank, and you can see the name right there. Of course, the interesting story about the German bank, if you didn't hear Mr. Richter, who was so kind to share a story, part of the reason that Sacred Heart Church is not as, it could have been bigger, but the reason being is, if anybody can remember, you may remember I said that the cornerstone was laid in 1913. Well, that same year, if you actually go over across the street, you will see that the German bank closed in 1913. Coincidence? No. because one of the German tellers closed up one night because it was a holiday, because the owners were wanting to go have a little festivities. One of the tellers closed the bank and closed it permanently because they took all the money with them and headed on a train back to took a train back up north and headed back to Germany, and they never got caught. Well, guess what church had their money in that bank when they were building their new building? Sacred Heart. Now Sacred Heart has a rendering from 1913 of the original Sacred Heart Church. It actually had another section in its bell tower. It would have probably been closer to 2 stories higher than it is today.
With clocks.
Huh?
With clocks.
With clocks. And so I have always said, imagine how beautiful it would have been coming down 278 east and coming into Cullman and seeing the steeples 2 stories higher than they are today. Just a few other notes. One of the earliest performance halls in Cullman was where the German Bake is now. It used to be called Armbruster's Hall, and it was built in the late 1870s. That was the first entertainment center in Cullman. And then it burned down and was made into what is now the German Bank and Mary Carter Paint Store, which, of course, the Mary Carter Paint Store is of course, a very famous name, and there's a lot of history there, and I would be amiss not to say that the paint store used to be home to the Cullman Telephone Exchange, which was an independent telephone company that eventually sold itself to the Bell System Telephone Company, which of course is today AT&T. Now, up there on the corner you will see a cupola, or the remainings of it from the tornado. Now they used that cupola at around the turn of the century because in those days the train track was flat and you could actually see the train coming, so they would have a lookout to let the folks know that the train was coming. So that's also a very historic.
Are they going to build it?
I hope they.
I think he is.
The third one's being built right now.
Yes. Now that, and it's
He's
been blown.
lost 2 of them.
Yeah, he's lost 2 of
The
them.
first one,
That's right.
and then that one is a rebuild.
He lost 2.
That's right, he did. As you can see, Bush Feed and Seed and Feed, you can see the name right over that far door on the right-hand side of Mary Carter Point Store. The Youngs have been very kind to allow the Historical Society to put murals there, because that's a very historic building. I mean, we could cover the whole building with all kinds of businesses it's housed, but they've been very kind to our community. And I'm just going to go over a couple other things. Next to it is, of course, the Hout Ice Factory, very famous, and most people, are familiar with that. One other thing I want to point out, if you look at the end of the corner, you, of course, will know that stood the Busy Bee Cafe. And unfortunately, it was lost during the tornado, and we wish those folks all the best as they begin and hopefully rebuild. But on that corner was, according to the Sandburn maps, in 1878, I got that right, 1878, was the first building we know of that was Cullman's post office. So on that corner was Cullman's first post office. It was a modest 2-story wooden frame building. Then they, of course, later moved it to the building that I talked about earlier, and a print shop moved into it. So one other thing, if you see across the street, that used to be Wernth's Store and Delicatessen. That's where Sarah Baker's law office is, across the street on that corner. We were also told that they were instrumental in a couple other businesses. It was a 3-story building. They also sold 2 items. One was, of course, bootlegging, and the other one was Ladies of the Night. So, one other thing that was also going on in this block was, of course, White's Cottage. That is Cullman's oldest house. Thank you, Greg. That's right. And I encourage anybody to take some time to go over there and read the marker. A lot of good history on there, too. So we're going to move across the street and get to the wild side of town.
This is not the original location of the house. It was moved from another place, but
The building here that used to be the bank,
right.
does it still have like the old safe or anything left?
I don't think so. I don't think so because it became like a laundromat after that, and then it was when I was a kid, it was a laundromat. Or even before the laundromat, it was the telephone company. Like people my parents' age, all know that they could go in there and see like Ernestine, doing the little plugging the stuff in. And you could walk, the kids would walk by there and look at that and see all of them plugging that stuff in.
Is everybody okay? Is anybody? Next time we're going to have to get one. All of them. All of them. If we all stand here and face this way, it'll probably help. So, also, we'll be in the light, so maybe nobody will hit us.
Works for me.
While we're out walking, could I get a show of hands? Who here is not from Cullman County? Oh, that's terrific. Welcome to our fair city. Please excuse the fact that I'm yelling so loud. I normally don't do that. Or maybe Stacy may disagree with me. And I also want to thank Greg Richter, who's over here in the orange, and Miss Stacy Wigley over here, who is our lantern girl. Doing a great job. Got to have a leader, right? Folks, welcome to the wild side of town. This is where it was happening at the turn of the century. Now, we're just going to briefly go over, I would like to point out another historical building, which is the Cullman County Historical Society's building, is the Hayes House. You may not can see it, but it's the only building left on the block, 2 blocks down there. Again, I'd encourage anybody to go down there and take some time and visit it. Even tonight, there's probably enough light to see it. The building where you see the cars parked right there in that yellow, red, and the red light that's flashing yellow, that block is now the home of the Cullman County Courthouse. Now, let me tell you that the block that is now home to the Cullman County Courthouse was vacant until 1920, when it became home of the 2-story brick building Cullman Public School. The building housed a large auditorium and that had a balcony. Sadly, that building burned down in 1943, and today, Cullman County's 3rd courthouse stands on the block. That courthouse was completed in 1965 at a cost of $1.5 million. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I'm going to tell you about all the courthouses from this particular spot. Now, if you look across the street, you will see the site where you probably, does everybody see where the round top building is? It's got a little light on the top of it, just on this side of the First Baptist. That is, well, now it's not called First Federal anymore. It's called First Community Bank. It just recently changed its name. Okay, where First Community Bank now stands was, and I don't think Mr. Falk. Yeah, Mr. Falk owns that. He will be glad to know that the original Cullman's City Jail was located there. They think it's funny, now it's a bank, used to be a jail. Also on that block was Cullman's first town hall. And those were built in 1878. The city jail on the Sanborn maps was called a calaboose. They didn't call it a jail, they called it a calaboose. And calaboose, which is spelled Calaboose, is Spanish for lockup. So I think it was kind of funny. This is a German town, but they call it a Spanish calaboose. I don't know about that. So I thought that was interesting. From 1894 onward, the east side of the block where First Federal and that parking lot is, had numerous businesses and residential dwellings until the downtown plaza was built. That was torn down. It had several businesses, and one of those businesses was the barber shop, which is now over here on First Avenue in the building where Cullman Cleaners is. And another personal reference, I got my first haircut there. I thought that was pretty neat. They're still going, but I heard they're getting ready. They're thinking about retiring. Don't know if they will or not, but I actually went in there not long ago. They said they think they're retiring. course, right here today on the block that's home to Fuller and Willingham's law offices. You can see that at the end of the block, in front of the red SUV. A couple other things I want to talk about. Where Cullman Marble and Granite Company is, that used to be Cullman's number 3 fire department. And if you can see these two buildings right here, next to the marble department, it's actually 2 buildings in one, 2 businesses. On the left-hand side used to be Graff's Tin Shop. And on the other side, where now the downtown grill is, used to be, anybody know? It used to be a restaurant. Penn's Hamburgers, C&F Penn Hamburgers. Thank you. What's your name? Teresa. You win. If I had a prize to give away, I'd give you one. You're officially been. There you go, candle. Take it home with you. Now, today, where you see Cullman Savings Bank in the parking lot, that actually resided where the bank is today, and I have a feeling a lot of people will be able to tell me what that is.
Courthouse.
Which one? And the first courthouse. A lot of people don't know that. So, if you can picture this courthouse. And again, I'm thinking it's funny. This is where all the partying went on, and the jail and the courthouse was on this side. Coincidence? Okay. See, isn't history fun? Sometimes. Sometimes it's not. But, for the most part, it's good. I do want to say one thing. Cullman's first courthouse was built where Cullman Savings Bank is. It was built It was built on February 10th, 1879. That's when they had the grand opening. There's a photo of it that we have, and I'll be glad to when you hand this out. I'll be glad to show it to you. It only cost $5,600. It was a 2-story building. It had an unfortunate situation because in 1894 it was gutted. Now it still stood, so they was able to keep it until in 1912 it got burned down. That time completely. There was no renovating it. So Cullman's second courthouse was built. Now a lot of folks that can remember the second courthouse, most folks are saddened that it was torn down. But I do want to say that the construction on that courthouse, the second courthouse, began on November 1912, which earlier in that year, that was the year that the first courthouse burned down. And it was torn down in 1965. One other thing that I want to say is where the parking lot is. In 1888, the parking deck was home to a small brick grocery store, a saloon, and a drugstore. In 1894, these buildings were destroyed by a terrible fire that gutted the entire block. That also was the one that got the first courthouse, but the courthouse survived. Now, then it was constructed a 2-story building called the Cullman and Gertis General Merchant Store. Now, I also have a photo of that. It's a very interesting picture because the corner, it wasn't cornered off. It was actually, dadgummit, I'm dry. I forgot the name. The facade was actually kind of flattened on the corner. It wasn't cornered. It was sort of like, flat, and then the buildings went on each side. It's actually a very pretty building. Some of the things that were in that building. Now, it was called the Cullman and Gertis excuse me. Did I say that right? Let me make sure I said it right. The Cullman and Gertis General Merchandise Building. But it actually was more famous for some of the other businesses were in there. DG Clothing. That was actually the name of the building, but the first business that was in there was called DG Clothing and Millinery. Millinery, thank you. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Hat making. Thank you. It also had a hardware store, and then in the 1920s, it was a 2-story building, then a 3rd story was built, and the reason that they built this 3rd story because of the next business that was housed there, which was... Well, no, that's close. It probably went on there. The Eureka Hotel. The Eureka Hotel, that's right. A couple of other interesting things that was here. In the middle of the block, you will see, used to be a 2-story brick building known as McMinn's Opera House. Of course, it was torn down. It was built in the early 1890s. And it was known because it had, in the front of the buildings, it had ironworks, which was unusual for that time. They also had a saloon in there. In 1910, the building made way for 2 new tenants, a general store and a meat and sausage factory. The meat and sausage factory was in turn changed into a billiards room in 1917. Also on the middle of that street was the Watson's Department Store. Anybody remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also in the middle of that street was the Strand Theater. Another place that many people, they went to the saloon and they may have either, went over there to the delicatessen, or they may have went and got a movie. So, okay, now we're going to move real quick. Actually, I'm going to stop here and tell you. As you can see on the other side, there's Wells Fargo parking lot. Now, the Wells Fargo parking lot used to be 3 businesses where the parking lot is. On the corner was the Richter Hotel. The building to the next to us, which is closest to us, was the Richter Saloon. Those were both founded by W.F. Richter. And if I remember correctly, Greg, they were on the cemetery tour, wasn't he? W.F. Richter?
I think, yes.
Or was it Otto?
Oscar.
Was it Oscar? Okay.
Oscar Otto.
But it was actually founded by W.F. Richter. And next door to it was the Max Schmidt Bakery. Now, again, that was a very, 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 very big business because I was told... Any Richters here? That's okay.
I'm not related to them.
I know you're not. He's not related to him. But I was told, and I'm not going to tell the name, but this came down from one of the direct descendants, that this particular Richter was also famous for bringing the first ladies of the night to the town. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. Other things that were on that far side of the block facing north of significance was the Southern Express Company, which dealt with express mail, collecting tariffs, and transferring funds. The Democrat, which was one of the first newspapers in Cullman, which would later become the Cullman Times, and numerous offices that was on that block as well. The other thing of significance that was on that block, where Wells Fargo is today, was originally the Leith National Bank, which was founded by G. Scott Leith. And the building that you see today, where Wells Fargo, was built in 1977. All right? Now we're going to get these folks to help us cross the street. And we got about 2 more stops, and then we'll be done. So basically, again, when you got off the train, you had a choice of Colonel Cullman or the saloon on this corner, which used to be the Eureka Hotel, which housed the saloon, or the Richter Saloon. And again, there's one other thing that I want to tell you that I failed to, so I'll go ahead and stop right here before we cross. You may remember me telling you that Colonel Cullman went down to Montgomery when they were doing the Constitution before the one we had today. Well, Cullman actually was so popular as a destination because it was the only place in North Alabama you could buy draft beer for the longest time, from like 1888 to like 1910, if I remember correctly. Now, what would happen is, according to newspaper articles that we were able to obtain, people would come from Huntsville, Birmingham, Decatur, Jasper, and they'd get on the train and they would stop here. Now, every city that would come from all these parts would have a particular hotel that they would stay at. So that means that, and we haven't been able to figure out which, but we do know that certain ones stayed at the Richter Hotel if they were from Huntsville, or if certain people were from Birmingham, they'd stay at another one that I'm about to tell you about. and same thing with Decatur. So every town had its own little hotel. And from newspaper articles that we were able to obtain, the city of Cullman's population would literally double in a weekend. People would come down on Friday, leave on a Sunday, and the city of Cullman would literally, its population would double in one weekend. So that's how significant alcohol was to Cullman at the turn of the century.
And they had like activities for them.
Oh yeah,
weekend, like
and,
pool and
yes, and we're going, and we talked about billiard rooms, and we're going to talk about one on the next block. Of course, we had the Delicatessen, the Richter Hotel. Of course, we had the Armburst Hall. We had opera theaters. There was a lot of entertainment going on here. So this was sort of like the Hollywood of the state of Alabama. Okay, we're going to cross the street, and so everybody be real careful. Hey, can we get y'all to come across?
We need to get across fast because these people can't see and
Yeah.
they're coming over
And
the hill.
I'll hold it up.
If the light
If
changes.
they can hold that, we'll go.
Yeah, I know. The line down there changed. You're supposed to get across the road.
William sent them in for the Heritage Park to do some running.
Oh, cool.
Raccoon. See the raccoon? This is one off the road. Careful when we get out of there. There you go.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go down to the end of the block here. I just kind of stand in the middle of everybody so they can hear me. We got just a couple more stops and then we'll be heading on back to the museum. Now on the block that we're on today, there's really basically where you see this middle strip from all the way down to where Arnold Street is today, which used to be, I forgot the name of it, all the way down to the courthouse. This used to be park. It used to be park on each side when the railroad tracks were ground level. The only other significant thing other than the depot park was across the street, and we'll go over there and show that where Stiefelmeyer's building is, where that parking lot is now, they used to actually store beer kegs. On this side, on this corner, there used to be a water tower, and that's what the trains used to feed water into the trains. This was also a very important block. On the corner here used to be the Alabama Hotel, which was a two-story wooden frame building. On the second story was the rooms, and on the first story was a saloon. 3 saloons when you got off the train. Interesting. It was. Now, I got something interesting here, too, and this kind of makes sense. Now, I already told you where the first city jail was. Well, the county decided, well, we got a problem. We're going to have to build a jail. Well, guess where they built it? right here where J. Drake Saloon and Spa is, which is the first Cullman County jail. Then apparently they decided that they was having so much fun with all these people they were arresting. They shut this one down and moved over there to where First Federal is today, where First Community Bank is today, and they made they made that jail even larger. So that was kind of neat there too. Also here on the corner used to be R.J. York Livery Stable and Mule Shed. It was shut down in the 1894 and was replaced by another saloon. So 4 at one time. Now, if you look at the block, if you look at the next block, you will see, you'll see some boats and stuff. Actually, I hate to say it, not a lot of action there. It did have a couple of businesses, a blacksmith shop and a wagon shop, where there was a major fire in 1894. Now remember, that was the same fire that reached all the way over there where the first courthouse was built. So these 3 blocks were engulfed by fire in 1894. Now, after the fire, basically there was only one building there. It was called the Cotton and Farm Implement Warehouse, and it was built shortly after the fire. And ironically enough, it burned down too. Now, one other thing that I would like to bring up. Over there where Premier Bank is, that used to be home, and I'm going to give the folks a chance to tell me what that used to be. Yeah. Actually, the original name of that company was the Casper Arnold and Son Planning Mill. Now they owned that whole block. Now let me tell you what those folks did. That block at one time contained the following businesses by the same man: a planning mill, a sash door and blind factory, a building for glazing paints and oils, a warehouse, a marble shop, a lumber yard, and a dry kiln. K-I-L-N. Kiln, excuse me. Now, one other thing about that, the outside of the building the main building was originally wooden. And I guess he started making some money. He tore it down, and he made the wood frame building into an iron building. And, of course, that was torn down later on. And, of course, you see the block as it is today. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to walk on down to the last block, and we're going to cover a couple of blocks at the same time. So if you'll follow me, we got one more stop. And I got 8 minutes.
Everything coming along all right?
Yeah, saloons. It's a happening place to be.
Watch out, guys. Last time I made everybody do that, it didn't work. And as I already told everybody, I'm just going to make a quick stop here. Across the street, as you may know, was the beer kegs, and of course the Stiefelmeyer store, which is very famous in Cullman. A lot of history that I wrote up on that. That block actually housed also the first hotel, which was called the Merchants Hotel, and it was built in 1875. Many businesses there. Sterling Ice Cream Parlor, Bittner Jewelers, the Palace Barber Shop in Bath, the Lewis Grove Beauty Shop. I mean, it's just rich with history. Lots of folks. Now, right here on this block was the original home of the Stiefelmeyers. Had wrought iron all the way around it. Also, one other thing where Papette's is, that used to be the Mike Wagner building. Now, the reason that I bring that up before we get moving down the street, by the way, across the street here used to be a lime house, where this block is today. A lime warehouse. They actually stored lime there. Not lime like little fruits, lime for, no, I wish. Lime for, to put on the crops, to prepare. Okay, then what I was going to say was this was actually, this street right here that we're on, First Avenue, and this particular area was actually the hub of Cullman. You would see from all the way down there where 278 is, all the way down here, people would just be walking. It was a very busy place. Now, one of the reasons that this particular area was very important was where Papette's is today. That actually used to be Mike Wagner's building, but what he would do is 2 to 3 times a week, he would print the death notices. And people would come here to see who in the county had died. And that's why people gathered here quite often. Now, we're not going to get too close to the music, but we're going to make one last stop, and I'm going to tell you about the next block. I'm going to take over the street because history is important. And this particular block is as important as any street in Cullman. Now this, of course, as many of you know, is what is referred to today as the Warehouse District. Originally, this block next to the railroad was made up of only residential dwellings from one end all the way down to the other. Then, the first business came up on this block in 1900. That business is where Rumor's Deli is today. Now, Rumor's Deli is all the way down on the end, the 3-story building. Now, it was a wooden frame building, but it had a very interesting product. It was called Cullman Guano Works. Now, for those of you that are laughing, can you tell us what guano? Can you tell us what guano is? Bat poop. So So next time you eat at Rumors, you can tell them that Michael said it was the original home to the Cullman Guano Works. And I got a sandburn map to prove it. Then in the 1900s, that building was torn down and the C. Arnold and Sons storage warehouse was built. Then in the late 1920s, that building became the Pinehart Building. And many of you know what the Pinehart Building did. They sold strawberries. And what they would do, of course, brothers Fred and Beck Pinehart would purchase strawberries throughout the community, load them on the freight carts, ice them down, and send them north, rolling on the train. Now, what I mean by rolling is they would get on the phone and call and sell them as the product was rolling up the railroad tracks. And the strawberries made it as far as Chicago. And the strawberries that came from Cullman were very popular on that route. One other thing that I would like to say, where the rotunda is today. Of course, there is a big party movement going on over there.
Oh, don't do that.
No, that would be terrible.
I'm so sorry.
That would make the front page of the news, though. Okay, one other thing that I would like to say is where the rotunda is today, and that is also very important that we think about that. That used to be the Clark family residence, and of course, that street's called Clark Street. It was originally Chester and Anna Clark, and they moved into that dwelling in 1930. They came from Minnesota, married, and had 12 children. Chester was a brick mason and established a brickyard west of town. As I mentioned, the street there was originally called Arnold Street. Now, where the fest hall is today, real quickly, that used to be the original Cullman Waterworks. There's a very detailed history of how of Cullman got its water, and it got it from various sources throughout this area. Come on through. But I would like to say, hey, Miss Gutchen, I would like to say that in May 1900, the city map shows that the reservoirs were pumping 300. It had 2 McGallon steam pumps that pumped 300 gallons of water per minute each. So that was actually pretty good. It was raised to 4 pumps by 1915. The other thing that I'd like to mention is at the very end of on the other side of the street, and you can read the sign, is the second Cullman Depot. Now, what is really interesting about that depot, and this will be the last thing we talk about, the depot is a Spanish missionary style depot. Now, when the L&N Railroad, they decided to build 2 of them, and they were actually they were testing them out because people were saying that their depots were kind of shoddy. So they were doing this as an attempt to make the depots more attractive to the folks. So if you've ever been inside, it's very ornate. They've got marble and everything in there. And of course, it was so expensive and so pretty that they decided they couldn't afford to build anymore. So they built 2. One was here. The other one was in Tennessee, and it burned down. So this is the only mission-style depot that's still remaining today that was built by the L&N Railroad. Now, folks, again, I encourage everybody. I hope they had a good time. I see that I got 8:34, so I'm sorry about 4 minutes over. I hope everybody had a good time. I will entertain questions if anybody has any. Again, if you would like the copy of this, I'm working on getting it online. Feel free to call me at home. My name is in the book, Michael Sullins. But all I ask is that you call me after Oktoberfest, okay? October 9th. So I hope everybody has a good time at Oktoberfest. Danke schön. I would be amiss if I didn't say something in German. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening and enjoy Oktoberfest. Thank you very much. so much more to go. Well, I'll have them online.